Welcome. Another episode, another live episode, Pound for Pound Boxer Report, episode 471. I am your host, Michael. Joining me this week, usual cast of characters, Gail from nyfights.com. I'm Daniel from Full Boxing News and the Inscriber. What's going on, lady and gent?
We're coming off, I think, what's been one of the biggest boxing weekends in years. I would gather to say at least since the start of the pandemic.
Are going to be certain the biggest week of 2025. That's for doggone sure. For those who are new to Pound for Pound Boxing Report, Pound for Pound Boxing Report live YouTube show, podcast discussing all things boxing. No matter when boxing is good, we'll talk about it. When it's bad, we will talk about it. Bottom line is, if it concerns the sweet science, it will get discussed. If you want to, if you wish to email us, you can do so with any questions, comments, etc. You can do so P4pboxing at p4pboxingreport.com. If you check the description here on the live feed, or if you're watching it at a later date, you'll see the links to where to check us out all over social media, links to the links to what the page on Facebook, Twitter, for the time being, Tumblr, IG, as well as the link to the YouTube channel. If you wish to donate, you can do so. Let donation be the best nation. You can do so at either Cash Me or PayPal. It wouldn't matter to us. It's $1, $2, $5, whatever you wish to contribute. We will be grateful. It'll help the overall production behind the scenes. Let's get things going this evening by. Okay, I named this particular episode referencing the word greatness, right? Because you have to give either great fighters currently or fighters who on the verge of reaching greatness their flowers. And a fighter who's really on the verge of getting to that great level, a term that's often overused, not just in boxing, but sport in general, is one Jesse Bam Rodriguez, right? Uh, kind of was under the radar given all the boxing that took place this weekend, but I want to mention him first, and I'm going to you, Gail. Bam was in a unification bout at 115 pounds in Frisco, Texas. Fought South African Phumelela, excuse me, Cafu. For those who may not remember, Cafu is the South African fighter who went over to Japan, beating Kosei Tanaka. Uh, Surprising result to win the W to win a title at 115. Fought Bam right in Texas. Talked about how he was ready to go to war with Bam, and paraphrasing him, take his head off. Did not turn out to be the case, as Cafu fought a little bit too hesitant for my taste. Uh, let Bam take the play from in the bout from early on, and Bam just basically slow death, right? Walked him and chopped him down with body shots. The thing in route to a 10-round stoppage, the thing for me, Gail, about Bam, why do I say he's on the verge of greatness? Not because of just resume and what he's accomplished, undefeated, now unified champion in two divisions, right? But when you see him fight, um, the combination of IQ, the combination of skill and power, and his footwork, arguably the best in the sport, rounding out to be a superb, well blended fighter. There are some fighters who can do something, who can do a little everything well. I would say Bam is a fighter who does things, it goes beyond well. There are multiple aspects of his game that are just outright superior.
And let's remind ourselves, he's 25 years old. 25 years old. I remember when he was 19 and really first pursuing his trade at the Robert Garcia Boxing Academy. Robert did an interview talking about his various stable of fighters, and there were a lot of other big names there 6 years ago at the time. But Robert made a point of saying, I've got this 19-year-old kid, flyweight. He's the best fighter in my gym. I mean, we thought he was nuts. But you know what? Robert could see it. Even back then, he could see it. The talent, the potential, the skill set. And now it is being, honed to a fine shine. Cafu had a really interesting game plan. And at least he came in with a very solid game plan. Clearly, they had watched a lot of Bam's fights. He decided he was going to back up to the corners and operate in a small space there to cut off Bam, circling to right and to left to hit him from angles, which is what he does so brilliantly. And it's very similar to vintage Manny Pacquiao and Vasyl Lomachenko. Boy, Kit picked two finer role models for smaller fighters. Wasn't the worst idea in the world, because God knows nothing else has worked against Rodriguez. But, he didn't really execute it, and he didn't have enough firepower to keep Bam off. He also, I think, miscalculated that he could wear Bam down. Bam's got a terrific engine. So, credit to him for giving it a try, for at least trying to come up with something. But eventually, Bam starts to apply the pressure and adjust. And if he can't hit you one way, that's fine. He'll pick one of the others that he's successful with. And he eventually adjusts. You're right. As I described it to a colleague of ours, I said that Cafu was nibbled to death by ducks until Bam finally caught him, with a couple of hard shots. Actually, he caught him with a shot that I thought buzzed him in the 5th round, but he really went to town in the 9th round. At that point, Cafu tried to hold, because it was really all he had left. He was going down if he didn't do that. And they end up kind of tumbling to the canvas in sort of this football tackle. And they got up, they got separated. Cafu's corner was smart to recognize that he had pretty much lost every round, and there was no point at the end of the 9th round to let him get drilled and knocked out at that point. So they were smart to save Cafu from himself to fight another day. It's Cafu's first loss. It's his first stoppage as well. In fact, I don't think he's even been knocked down before that. So, and technically, he did stay on his feet. So he'll live to fight another day. He's still got plenty of talent. He can carry on. But when you step in against Bam, you are stepping in against somebody, a very different animal. This is a new experience. And he's done it not only to somewhat faded potential Hall of Famers and sure Hall of Famers like Juan Francisco Estrada, Carlos Cuadras, Srisa so Rungvisai. But let us also remember, he took out a coming on strong champion, Sonny Edwards, like he was nothing. So, as Rodriguez said, as Bam said at the end of the fight, bring on Martinez.
Indeed, he's going to fight Fernando Martinez, who has the WBA belt. Bam, I believe, is IBF and BO, right? And Pumita Martinez is coming off of 2 wins, back-to-back wins over Kazuta Aoka, right? 4-division champion, future Hall of Famer. But I will argue that the Aoka that Martinez beat is a fighter past his prime. He's going to be in for an entirely different story when he faced Bam November in Saudi Arabia, Gail.
I'm sorry, you broke up a little. Ask me the question again.
I was saying, indeed, he's fighting Fernando Martinez, who has a belt also at 115. WBA version. Pumita is coming off with back-to-back wins over Kazuta Aoka, right? Future Hall of Famer, four-division champion, but I will argue that Ioka was past his prime in those two fights.
Yeah.
Despite that impressive win, name-wise on his resume, um, Rodriguez is going to be in for an entire different story when he faces Bam in November in Saudi Arabia.
Yeah, I agree. He may give Rodriguez a good fight. I hope he does. It should be entertaining. I'm sure that, unlike some other fighters, he would be willing to go out on his shield and give a good fight. So he'll earn that pay, whatever he's getting paid to fight Saudi Arabia. Martinez will earn it, and Bam will make sure he does. Yeah, yes, wins over Ioka are nothing to sneeze at, but it's a little like seeing Bam take out all these, former world champions. Still terrific fighters, still plenty skilled, but a little bit past their peak. And you're right, Martinez did the same thing with Ioka, even though that's a pretty impressive name on your resume. I just think he is going to step in there and think he can handle business with Bam and find out, like every single other guy, that it's not the same thing, that he truly is a generational talent.
And indeed, at this point right now, he looks unbeatable at 115 pounds, and looks like he's on a clear mission to just clean out um, the division. What I will say before we move on to Daniel to talk about other fights, um, Kenshiro is talking about wanting to move up to 15 to fight this dude. Uh, Really good fighter is Kenshiro, but do you really want to fight this emerging force in Bam Rodriguez? I applaud. You wanted to reach greatness. I applaud you wanting to fight the best of the best, but it'll be a good fight. But I don't know if he'll beat him.
I'm like you. I admire that. Good for Kenshiro. Love that he's talking that way. But right, do you want that to be your first fight in your new division? I mean, that's crazy talk if you ask me. Kind of rash. And I think that I'm not sure Bam would wait around for him. Bam needs goals, no question, and he can certainly prove, he can prove on paper what we were all saying and seeing, by becoming undisputed. I mean, that's a notch in anybody's resume. He's smart to pursue that if he can. And then he goes up to 118, and we all know who's hovering at the division right above that.
Indeed, indeed. You talking about Junto and or um, the Monster Naoya in a way. On the undercard of this fight, Daniel, you had one of the up and coming fighters at 168 pounds, Diego Pacheco, ranked number one by the BO at 168. Fought Trevor McCumby. The fight with the distance, right? But in covering it for ThreeKingsBoxing.com, there were plenty of, there was a smattering of boos throughout. I thought the criticism of the fight itself was a little bit unfair. Um, the goal is to fight smart, not hard, right? And to me, Pacheco used his intelligence. He didn't fight foolish. You got the job done. Uh, McCumby has a style that's a bit tricky, right? The same McCumby who gave Trevor Plant, Caleb Plant, excuse me, some problems a few fights back, right? And I don't knock Pacheco for what he did. He got the win. Now they're talking about. Remember when I mentioned the possibility of a tantalizing prospect of a fight between Pacheco and Hamza Sarah, who's coming off of the stoppage win over Edgar Berlanga. Uh, I thought that fight, they would never make that fight. I guess a week later I'm wrong because it looks like Team Pacheco and the team of Saraz is looking to put those guys in the ring later on this year.
That's not surprising. Not surprising at all because we had to really think about how this fight was done. It was beautifully done on behalf of Pacheco because he mastered the art of keeping his distance and not letting McCumby get enough inside to make him lose that size and that reach advantage. Which you have to consider. It's not something that a lot of guys around that size don't want to do anymore, mainly because of while they're going to talk about other fighters in that area in the show. But it was a smart fight. I know, I get it. It's 168. We know what the situation is. We know who you're auditioning for, technically. And you want to make sure that you look explosive while doing it. But the mark of somebody who is a great champion is you have to learn to fight every style. And McCumby was a great lesson for Pacheco, like learning how to fight smart, learning how to be patient, and learning not to let other people dictate the fight. I did hear the boos a little bit after the fight, but it's the growing pains. It's the growing pains of a young contender. Like Pacheco's, as long as everything's around, Pacheco's going to be a player in the division for a little bit, especially post Canelo. So that's going to be a situation that we have to watch out for. And if you're Pacheco's team, I understand the Sherrod. I understand that fight. You want to get something exciting after this fight, technically, from an aesthetic point of view. But you did a great performance, and you can pretty much knock it out for the next performance in Sherrod coming up.
If that fight between Pacheco and Sherrod indeed comes off, Daniel, early breakdown, excuse me.
Well, you have guys that are a little bit tall for the division, and who each want to please the crowd. It is going to be an interesting back and forth, but you have to see if Pacheco's smarts are going to factor in here, or is he going to try to make an exciting fight? Because it's true, one of the things that happens if you're a contender and you get a fight like this, you get a performance like this, sometimes you want to overdo it in the next fight and try to create a firefight when you don't need to. It'll be an interesting fight. I would probably give the edge to Pacheco right now.
More fights to talk about while that card was happening in um, Texas. You also had another card happening in Las Vegas, Gail. The headliner, of course, of this particular card in Vegas was Barrios and Pacquiao. We'll get into that in a bit. But on the undercard, you had the rematch between Sebastian Fundura and Tszyu, right? They fought last year. The fight was highlighted by a severe cut on Tszyu. He fought through the blood, literally, but Fundora ended up winning by decision. They fought a rematch here. Fundora put Tszyu down early. Tszyu got up, landed his fair share of shots, but to me, strangely, um, he retired round 8. Fundora was landing his fair share of shots, of course, and Tszyu was feeling it. But I thought Tszyu was in the fight primarily for the most part. Uh, was this the result of the physical pounding that Fundora was putting on Tszyu, or was this a sign of mental breakdown, physical pounding that Fundora put on him, or kind of a mental breakdown on the part of Tszyu, or a little bit of both?
I think Zoo's team has really failed him. We all know what Tim Zoo is about. He is a come forward, typically aggressive, offensively Australian fighter. I mean, that's who they are, right? That's in their DNA. And they knew that about him when he fought Fundura the first time, got hurt, and he was going to soldier on and put himself, right in the thick of it, no matter how bad that cut was. They should have never let that fight go on. They should have given him another round or two, called it a no contest that he couldn't continue. Nobody would have thought the worst of him, right? Instead, a fight that he was winning early, looked like he was going to easily take care of Fundura, ended up being a disaster. Then they let him rehab, and what did they do? They put him right back in with a killer in Murtazaliev, and he got an even worse beatdown. Okay, still not necessarily fatal because everyone kind of gave him a pass on the first Fundura fight, given the situation. Murtazaliev, that was a shocker. And they put him in for one rehab fight with Joey Spencer. Okay, that's exactly what they needed to do. But he needed another year's worth of those fights. And I would even argue that putting him back in with Fundura was a bad idea. I get it. Again, that Australian, go after it, no holds barred mentality. He wanted to get his revenge. But I think that was a lot to ask, certainly at this point. And what did they do? They toss him right back in harm's way. We saw the result. They should have considered, for example, putting Tszyu in with Keith Thurman, which was the original idea back when this, spiral down started with him. That was a doable fight. Keith Thurman, is 5'6", 5'7" on a good day, right? They put him in with a guy a foot taller who's had some terrific fights since he fought Tszyu, who's only getting better, who I would argue is, until Brian Norman or someone else proves themselves, I would argue Fundura is at the top of the division right now. Jury's out about Murtazaliev. I'm not sure whether that's how he would operate with somebody other than Tszyu. And, God bless him. Tszyu goes down 2 minutes into the fight on his backside. Got up, clearly buzzed, but he did get his legs under him and his wits about him, and he decided, F it, I'm going out on my shield, because that's how he is. And I applaud him for showing that kind of courage. That is the stuff that really endears a guy to the fans. And they loved it. And he cracked Fundura more than once. He definitely caught him. I was incredibly impressed how much Fundura's chin and his resistance has improved. That's what that showed me. But Fundura gives Tszyu hell in the 7th round. He didn't go down, but it was only because he got saved by the bell. And sitting ringside there after the bell sounded, Tszyu put his hands on the top rope before he walked over to his corner. And I'm not sure he initially knew what direction his corner was in. He was concussed, buzzed. He was not there. But he sort of reoriented himself and sort of slowly made it back to his corner. He wasn't even sure whether to sit down or not. Credit to referee Harvey Dock, who walked over there, one of the best referees in the business right now, in my opinion, walked over to the corner and said to Tszyu, apparently, as we were told later, do you want to continue? And thank God, Tszyu did what his corner apparently didn't step in to do, or anybody else. He looked at Doc and said, I'm done. I'm done. Absolutely a disaster for Tszyu. I'm not sure what happens now, what he wants to do, what he's got the heart to do. Can he rebuild? He's very popular. There are fighters who've gone on with as many losses, but he cannot go right back in there again. Even after a short tune-up fight, he needs a long rehab. He needs a long rebuild. it's going to be up to him to decide what to do. Fundura looked sensational. He's matured as a fighter. He's matured as a person. And for those who haven't heard, after all of that great result this weekend, terrific fight performance, that man got himself admitted to Harvard to study engineering, which he starts in the fall. He was wearing a Harvard sweatshirt at the post-fight news conference. That completely blows my mind. Very, very impressed with him. And yes, compliance, if I'll use your first name, compliance, I did ask a fight at the post-fight news conference, and it had to do with their father trainer, Freddie Fundura. Gabriella, who was present in at Sebastian's side all week at the post-fight news conference, was sitting there. She has been very vocal about the fact that she believes Freddie should be in the running for trainer of the year. And I agree. Whether he gets it is another issue, but he's never really seriously been considered. So I asked them, given Sebastian's performance, given the fact that his sister is undisputed, is it time to take his candidacy for trainer of the year more seriously? And Gabby was like, yes, 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 which I knew she would say. Fundura says he's going to fight one more time this year, at least, maybe two. And by the way, while he's going to Harvard. So is there anything that kid can't do? I can't think of it.
Quick follow up. You were in attendance at this card, right? Um, Given your going talking to various media members or folks behind the scenes, has there been any word in terms of who Fundora is talking? I know after the fight, I heard Boots Ennis' name mentioned in these boxing streets. I don't know about the possibility of that. It'll be a fight I would be interested to see. What have you heard about what Fundura, Team Fundura, has in the plans?
I haven't heard anything specific. The fact is, Fundura says yes without hesitation to whatever's presented to him. I do think he probably wants to collect some belts, so that's what we're talking about. Um, I'm not sure that's a good fight for Boots at this stage. I do think I think Boots would have a lot of trouble with Fundura, like everybody else. Um, he showed his vulnerability earlier in his career when Brian Mendoza caught him, but based on the shots I saw him taking from Tszyu, he has toughened up considerably since then. In fact, Mendoza was there at the fight, there in the MGM Grand Garden Arena watching Fundura, and even he afterward was in the media center talking about how impressed he was with Fundura, and that's saying something from somebody who had gotten the better of him. I think Fundura would tell you, he wasn't the first member of the family to become undisputed, so he's got some catching up to do with his sister, and they are competitive. I think he would want to face, I think it's an anyone with a belt situation for him. If he has to take best available, if there's a nice payday with it, I think that he'd probably prefer to stay busy. But you do at this level have to worry about those so-called banana peel fights. While you're waiting for the fight you really want, you take another fight and it trips you up. And he doesn't want to do that. What's also rather mind-blowing is he is still making 154 with zero trouble. At 6'6", making 154 handily. He was a pound under. It was nuts.
To the fight that was on the minds of everyone. I'm getting the conversation started with you, Daniel. That is, of course, Mario Barrios defending the title against Manny Pacquiao. Fight ended up being a draw. Remember last week when I said that if Barrios had real difficulty with the 46-year-old Pacquiao. He was going to get red for Phil. Well, that starts right now. Now, I know Pacquiao did some good things in this fight, right? But at the same time, why was Barrios so hesitant in spurts? Um, I don't get it. You shouldn't have let Pacquiao really control one aspect of this fight. There was a lot of periods of lull um, in this contest, and this says a lot more about Barrios in the negative, in my view, than it does positive anything about Pacquiao. Don't be fooled by the flurries in there. Barrios shouldn't have let Pacquiao get off really one time in this fight. The reason that this fight was a draw for me, a lot of it squares on the shoulders of Barrios. Um, I had a pretty low opinion of him heading into this fight. Um, his stock didn't raise, in my opinion, in the aftermath of this at all.
This wasn't the worst situation, luckily. The worst situation would have been if Pacquiao blew him out. But in some ways, you can say it may be a little bit worse because once you think about it, a lot of times, especially when you fight legends like Manny Pacquiao, you're more in awe of the legend than you are of the fighter in front of you. Because it was clearly evident Manny Pacquiao is no longer the speed demon that he was in his prime, or even in his late prime, pre Mayweather fight. It was just a little bit of a slog in the middle of the rounds. And Barrios unfortunately did let Manny get a few rounds in and get a good lead. But you can tell that if he would have actually countered more earlier on in the middle rounds, landed better punches in the earlier rounds, he probably would have gotten the decision. But then again, he probably would have never gotten the credit that you would think you would get because then you're fighting the 46-year-old Manny Pacquiao, who, like I mentioned, is not as fast as he is now. Not as fast as he was in his prime. Not as sharp as he is in his prime. Not as powerful of a puncher that he was in his prime. And that, unfortunately, it's not as bad as saying that Manny Pacquiao stained his legacy because he didn't. And luckily in this case, he didn't stain his legacy. It's just unfortunately a side effect of probably needing money because unfortunately Manny Pacquiao is a person that does not have the ability to say no when it comes to people asking him for help. Not to mention still that he's still in the Filipino government or involved in Filipino politics. And not to mention probably the angriest persons of that decision were probably not even Manny. It was his and Floyd Mayweather's account. Because unfortunately there were rumblings that if Manny would have won this, we literally would have gotten the rematch we probably all didn't want a decade later in Maypac 2. And luckily, this draw takes that away.
But still, the problem with here is that this is going to give Manny the full incentive to fight again. Um, be it a rematch with Barrios, be it with somewhere else. I don't care how he looked in this fight. He should not, in my opinion, he should not be in there. And when he gets in there with a real good fighter at welterweight or whatever weight it is, the age and the attrition and all that is going to show itself, Gil.
I was one of those people before the fight who said, gosh, you know, I mean, there are a few fighters I admire more than Pacquiao. his life story, his journey, his accomplishments are undeniable. Undeniable. And he richly deserved being voted into the Hall of Fame. Although the votes aren't revealed, it would shock me if it was anything less than 99.9%, right? So when he announced he was doing this, I was not in favor of it. I didn't like it. And when it came to predicting the outcome, I did not think he could overcome 4 years out of the ring, being 46 years old and standing in front of a 30-year-old, Mexican-American from Texas, who is the tallest fighter he's ever faced, ever. And by God, he did it. He did it. I was among those members on Media Row who firmly believed Pacquiao won. I did not think it was particularly close. Barrios did finally pick up the pace. His trainer, Bob Santos, finally lit a fire under him those last few rounds, and it did help. And it did, for the three judges, allow him to pull off the draw. He would have lost if he hadn't won all three final rounds on all three scorecards. But in my opinion, I thought Manny had won the majority of the first 9 rounds, frankly, fairly easily. Most of those swing rounds, in my opinion, went to Pacquiao because of activity. Barrios conceded so many of the rounds by just simply not doing a whole hell of a lot. And I kept thinking, son, you are 30 years old. That man is technically, biologically old enough to be your father. What are you worried about? You really think he's going to crack you that hard? Well, at the post-fight news conference, Barrios was asked about this, and he said Manny can still crack. I still find it hard to believe Barrios was that concerned about incoming fire that he held back so much. I was wildly disappointed that Pacquiao didn't win. And at the post-fight news conference, as we talked to him, he made it very clear he never intended this to be a one-off fight. Pac-Man is back. He must have said that half a dozen times. He intends to have another fight before the end of the year. Who against who? That's going to be a rather interesting decision. He said he would give Barrios a rematch if he wanted it. If I'm Barrios, I'm thinking, hell no, I don't need to do that. I'm not sure what the matchup is. And yes, I had heard more than just a little chatter. I had heard some very loud opinions from people I respect that should Pacquiao win or even just look good, we could almost count on Mayweather-Pacquiao too. Now, Pacquiao threw a little bit of cold water on that himself. And he said, Floyd's retired, but, he retired a long time ago. He's done. And he said, but however, if Floyd should choose to unretire, sure, I'll consider that. Yeah, heck no. Pacquiao more or less said, bring it on. Whoever wants
Floyd can't help himself. He loves money too much. He can't resist a really good payday. We all know this.
Oh no. It's not the money. It's the attention. He could not. I bet he's stewing in his juice over the fact that Pacquiao was the center of attention in Las Vegas over the weekend.
Both and.
Yep. Well, I think the attention is probably more than the money. I mean, he's not going to turn down a big payday, and he will certainly.
We all know Floyd is a narcissist, so to that point, you're right.
And interestingly enough, I am a pretty avid reader of the Las Vegas Review-Journal, which is honestly one of the better daily newspapers still in 2025 in the United States. And it has been interesting to me how little the Review-Journal covers sort of your run-of-the-mill Las Vegas boxing events. You would think those would be on the front page of the Las Vegas sports section regularly, and they're not. But this past week, this Pacquiao card sure was in a very different way than I've seen for the last few years. And you know that Floyd had to have seen that. I would imagine local Las Vegas news coverage was all over this card. That is, in many ways, the MGM Grand Garden Arena, the building that Manny Pacquiao built. He was honored with a banner up in the roof of the arena as the fighter with the most appearances in its history. Saturday was his 16th fight in that building. So Floyd is very well aware of what's going on here. And I'm just saying, friends, do not be surprised to see it. You know what? Sometimes you just hear that distant sound of the train coming.
Sadly, I have no pushback. Um, I'm not going to say it's. I'll just end it at that. Sadly, I have no pushback, and I would not be surprised if we see a Pacquiao Mayweather fight either at the end of this year or some point in 2026.
Here's the hypothetical question to both of you guys. So somebody says, Michael, Daniel, going to fly you out to Las Vegas, give you a seat ringside, access to all of the events. If you would like to cover Mayweather Pacquiao too, do you say yes?
It depends on who's on the undercard.
Oh man, you're a tough out. You're a tough out. Daniel, what about you?
No.
Wow. Well, I'll be there all day. If it happens, I'll be there all day, every day.
No. Well, I'll elaborate on the reason why. It's just unfortunately because I know damn well, like Mike mentioned the undercard. You know damn well they're not gonna put any effort in the undercard of that type of fight.
Well, interestingly enough, one of the suggestions that is out there that I've heard from reputable people, none of whom are the ones that are the decision makers, is to put Nonito Donaire on the undercard.
Not enough. Not even close to enough.
Yeah, if you had a time machine and you gave me Nonito Donaire 15 years ago,
Right. Oh, the Filipino fans love him, though. It's possible. You know what would be interesting, and I wouldn't be surprised if this does come off. That would be, and if they do it before the end of the year or even early next year, you bring Fundura back. His home base of fans isn't that far away in the high desert of California in Coachella. He's very at home in Las Vegas. Maybe you put his sister on the undercard as well. Now that would be interesting. To my knowledge, I'd have to check. I'm not sure the two of them have ever fought on the same card. Certainly not for years.
Okay, if it was Gabby Fundura and Senicia Estrada decide to come back and they fight.
Oh yeah, that ain't happening.
Outside of that, still no.
I've heard people say that, and Senicia just laughs. It's like that's not happening.
No, Senicia is well taken care of. So
yeah, well, and truly, it wouldn't surprise me if what's also on her mind is, when a fighter retires, they start the clock ticking toward their eligibility for the Hall of Fame. You have another fight, it ends up resetting. Pacquiao waited long enough to get in and then decided to come back.
yeah, that is true. He did get put in this year.
Well, and they did generate discussion, particularly among the Boxing Writers Association of America, of which I'm a member, that they changed their modern day eligibility weight period from 5 years to 3 years not long ago. And there were people who were very much against that on the losing side of that change, who have said, see, that's why we think it should be 5 years, because on the outside of 3 years, there's still a possibility for certain guys coming back. I mean, Sugar Ray Leonard's a good example. He was out. However, when he came back, he was 30. He wasn't 46. So there you have it.
I mean, money, because money talks, because this is a bottom line business. You can very well see a scenario of a Pacquiao, or excuse me, Mayweather Pacquiao too. But personally, I just don't want to see it under any circumstances. Let's move on to the last fight here on the docket. At the beginning of the show, I talked about greatness vis-a-vis Bam. He's approaching that, right? A fighter who's already there, uh, Daniel and Gail, is Oleksandr Usyk, who made his return to the ring in London, rematch with Daniel Dubois. Right now, in the aftermath of this fight, you've been hearing a lot of disturbing things about Dubois and his preparation and supposedly what was occurring right before the in the hours before the fight. But in the ring, um, let me go back. In their first fight, Dubois had his moments, and there are people who will still argue that what was that low blow that was called was indeed a legitimate knockdown. In this fight, far different story. Usyk was sharp from opening bell, the accuracy, the points, the jab. Um, he was in full bloom, right? And Dubois did not stand a chance as he was dominated from second one, uh, put down twice in the fifth, stopped in the fifth. Um, Usyk is a contemporary, legit, great fighter. It's understandable why many would view him as number one pound for pound. Um, he could retire right now, and he's an instant Hall of Famer. Not only is he an instant Hall of Famer, Daniel and Gale, I would argue that Oleksandr Usyk is one of the best fighters of this current generation, past 25, 30 years. His resume, his, his ability in the ring, the way he carries himself as a sportsman outside the ring. Uh, Generally, there are no flaws with this man, with this fighter.
I would wholeheartedly agree. And one of the things that people had to see between this fight and the first fight, now granted, yeah, we'll talk about the rumor mill revolving the wall in a little bit, but great fighters in a rematch will make sure that any doubt that people had, especially if it was a semi-close fight the first time, gets erased in the
Perfect
rematch.
example. Perfect example. Ward in his rematch with Kovalev.
Ward, Kovalev, Floyd, like we talked about, Floyd versus the two people who I still consider phantom losses versus Castillo and Maidana. First fights, all out wars. Like I said, you can argue that Maidana and Castillo won. Second fights, complete domination from Floyd. This was that fight. Usyk countered. He never countered fairly well. He landed his punches right before Dubois could even have a chance to set up his jab. And ultimately, in that fifth round, when he got the first knockdown, the fight should have stopped right there. I get, like I said, giving some of that Dubois a chance, but you could tell he was not all there when he got up. That was mainly muscle memory, him getting up. And it showed in the second knockdown. And it showed in the way that Dubois reacted right after the fight was called. He didn't even protest it. He didn't even try. He just went to his corner because he knew exactly what happened. Now, this puts Usyk in pretty much a territory completely on his own, if I'm correct, if I'm thinking correctly. First of all, not only, once again, undisputed in two different divisions.
Three-time undisputed at that.
Yeah, three-time undisputed, twice in the glamour division of heavyweight. And you have to consider the fact, when you look back at Usyk's career, he in many ways is a throwback to the classic heavyweights that weren't guys like Joshua, like Dubois, like Tyson Fury, who were like 250 pounds or above. There were guys who like that, 210, 220. Guys that moved, guys that would dazzle you with how quick they are considering their size. That's what Usyk is. And in reality, like, what is there left to do for him? He has answered every call that was made of him. And especially in this fight, he has erased any doubt that people had of him when it came to his opponents. Now, granted, he has said one more fight. We know who ran his mouth right afterwards. But whoever gets picked for that final fight, they better relish the thought to say that you were the last opponent to follow Xander Usyk.
In the 48 hours roughly after this fight, Gail, there's talk of uh, um, Daniel Dubois having a party um, uh, the day before the fight, right? He only showed up to the venue less than 90 minutes before his ring walk before the fight began. But at the same time, Usyk was in top form. It wouldn't have mattered what Dubois showed up. He was not going to win. And dare I say, the reason that I don't want to see Usyk Fury 3, Usyk has beat him twice. And if that Usyk shows up in a third fight with Fury, not only is Fury not going to win a trilogy, he may well get stopped. He was that good, Oleksandr Usyk, on Saturday afternoon, our time in London.
Most trilogies only take place when the first two fights are split. The lone example that is an exception was Taylor Serrano 3, because the first two fights were so close and so competitive. And I would argue 3, because of Serrano's odd game plan, just didn't live up to expectations. There is zero need to see Usyk Fury 3. I don't think Fury wants to be humiliated and called greedy belly a third time. Not going to happen. From what I can tell, there are 3 options, and it depends on the audience, the payday, and what Usyk wants to do. The man who deserves the shot and the one opponent of the current top flight generation of heavyweights that Usyk hasn't fought yet is Joseph Parker, who has
That's
stepped
right.
aside and stepped aside and stepped aside. And it is not a bad style matchup. Joseph Parker has really upped and refined his game. He has earned this shot. Do I think he wins? No, but I think he'll get a lot closer than Daniel Dubois did. And Joseph has surprised us. He's well liked in the UK. I think that's the right fight to make. And maybe you take that fight to Saudi Arabia. The Brits want to see Usyk fight Moses Itama. Young lion coming up, a little bit like Canelo and Floyd, right? You put a young aspiring fighter, who's daring to be great, and give him a shot. I don't love that. That's kind of a hardcore fan's idea of a good fight. I mean, I don't object to it. I don't think it's necessary for Itama. I really don't. He looks to be the leader of the next generation of great heavyweights, and we'll see what happens. And then, who else is out there floating around? absolutely crazy, impossible, nutty, which means it probably could happen, especially if there's Saudi money behind it. You know, he was there. He got up in the ring.
No, don't say it.
Yes, he did.
Don't
Oh,
say
yes,
it.
he
Do not
did.
say it.
Yeah, it's absolutely ridiculous. There is so much intrigue involved, and the money would be off the charts if Usyk was to fight Jake Paul. I know it's it seems ridiculous to me. The only reason for Usyk to take that fight is if he decides. I mean, that'd be the easiest paycheck that man ever earned. No question about it. I don't even hesitate to say that. I do think what we'll see is Parker when he's ready, because Usyk, he has a lot of pride. He's a man of honor. I think that's the right way to go. For once, it would be the right thing for boxing to do. It wouldn't be a bad fight at all. I think that's the way to go. Usyk really does. He he fights for his faith, his family, his country. There were several dozen Ukrainian war veterans in the audience. He shouted them out after he won. He said, "War people," in his English, "War people, this is for you." He was meaning the veterans that he brought there to see the fight. That's all of that is so important to him, which makes him, beyond just his skills, such an admirable, decent human being. Um, but we'll see. Whatever he decides, we're not going to get to see Usyk for all that much longer. He has checked every box. He has achieved everything he could possibly achieve given his circumstances. Many of the things I didn't think he'd ever do. Let's all remind ourselves when he moved up to heavyweight that the talk was, well, gosh, he's got a lot of talent. It's too bad he's so small, and that he just won't ever get anywhere in the heavyweight division. And look what happened. And for a guy that we didn't think would size up or be able to compete with these big super heavyweights as far as power and attack, he cracked Dubois. That was hella impressive. Now, Dubois, had he had any more heart and guts, he could have gotten to his feet in that fifth round. But instead, no, he checked out.
Yeah, he did.
He was on his knees looking over at his corner.
Yeah, he did.
No heart, no heart. That's a shame. Dubois is sort of just a machine in human form. He isn't the great fighters, as we all know, and especially the ones we love the most, fight with passion, fight with heart. And Dubois is very cold in that regard. This is a job for which he has the skills, and he really does, but he doesn't have the drive. He just doesn't.
I can't add more to what you just said. A thinking man fighter Dubois is not to besmirch him, but you have to have some mental capacity in terms of intellectual. There's a certain level of intellectualism that you have to have in order if you want to be a really, really good fighter. It's not all about bronze, right? You have to have some brains in there. And to your point, Gail, you have to have some cojones. And at the end of the day, when he's really pressed, Dubois does not have it. Now, in terms of Usyk himself, in the last two episodes, the previous episode and tonight, a week ago, we praised what Shakur Stevenson did against Zepeda, right? Tonight, we talked about Bam Rodriguez and how terrific he was and is as a fighter. And Usyk in his outstanding display in the rematch with Dubois. If you are a southpaw, right, young, up and coming, and you just watching the fights, right, or if you're a young southpaw professional, you know what three fighters you really need to study right now? Shakur, particularly what Shakur did against Zepeda, study what Bam does, particularly in terms of footwork, and study what Usyk does in terms of footwork, skill, and intelligence.
Yeah.
If you follow the template of all three of those fighters and you have the dedication, as Gail said, and the heart and the commitment, you will be in good stead.
Well, and let me ask you this, and I think this will put even a stamp on the point you just made. We saw two guys get soundly defeated by two of those three names you just mentioned, Daniel Dubois and Tszyu. Which guy would you rather see again? I would much rather see Tszyu because
Simzu,
he went
Yeah,
out on his shield. Was it the smart thing to do? At least he pulled himself out eventually. But that somebody fans would want to see again. Dubois, and he was on such a good roll. What the hell happened? But after that, do you want to see? Would you prefer buying a ticket and spending your hard-earned money to see Dubois or Tszyu? Dubois, not so much.
absolutely. Let's move on to some news and notes because unfortunately we began things a little bit late, so I'm going one by one on these news. Not much given the closeness of this particular episode to the events of the weekend. I'll go back to you on this one, Gail. We in our discussion on Tszyu, you mentioned how he fought Murtazaliev
But you could
and
call him Bakhram, like everyone
Bakhram.
else does today.
And Bakhram, the IBF, it was announced today, order a fight between Bakhram, who has the IBF belt at 154, and Erickson Lubin, who I believe is his mandatory challenger now. Um, I get why they ordered the fight, Gail. The problem is I just don't know whether Lubin has the tools to hang with Bakhram long term.
Oh yeah, I think Lubin will give it a good go, but if the version of Bakhram that we saw drilling Tszyu is the real deal, Lubin will make it farther than Tszyu, but he won't make it to the end of the fight. But
Yeah,
he deserves every shot at trying.
absolutely. Another fight that was um, ordered, Daniel. I think it has the potential to be an interesting match. I said David Morrell and Callum Smith. That fight would be for the, I think, interim WBO belt at 175. Morrell didn't look great in his last outing, while Callum Smith in the fight against Boatsi, I felt looked very good. Uh, at 175, there's still something left to prove for Morrell, and I think Smith, if particularly the Smith that showed up in the Boatsi fight, would give Morrell a very good test.
Yeah, this is to me a very, very interesting fight because David Morrell, like I said, still getting used to the weight. And Callum, I've always said it, of the Smith family, he has always been the one with the most potential. And at 175, he's starting to realize that potential. Maybe he doesn't have to cut down and weight as much as he had to when it was at 168. He feels, looks around more comfortable at 175. He's made that his home. And it'll be a good test all around because you also got to consider the fact that Callum is particularly tall for the division. So that is going to be an interesting fight to see, but it would be a very, very good back and forth. You could probably have a pick 'em on it. Even though most people probably would say Callum based on him being in the division longer, I would probably say Morrell will take it.
Last bit of news, Gail. Josh Taylor, former undisputed champ at 140 pounds, right? Kind of sad news on his part. He announced that he has called it quit due to lingering eye injury. Um, so while Taylor has announced that he's hanging up the gloves for good, a quick word on the career of Josh Taylor. He had his peak when he beat Ramirez to become undisputed, but there was kind of a precipitous fall from grace afterwards.
Yeah. Josh Taylor was a fighter with a lot of heart, took on all the toughest opponents he was offered, didn't always perform, I'm sure, the way he hoped. When we saw him beat Ramirez so handily, I'm sure, as observers and fans, all assumed that that's who we would see continue, that that's who he was moving forward, and looking back now, perhaps that was a peak that wasn't his norm because we never really saw that version of him again. Um, and it's a shame that he won't get a few more, opportunities to show that that wasn't perhaps a one-time performance. But God bless him for making what I'm sure was a very difficult decision to pull himself out before he permanently lost or his eyesight completely or impaired it for the rest of his life. We have to recognize as observers that while we might like certain fighters to stay in the game longer and enjoy what they have to offer us as athletes, they have many, many more years ahead of them outside the ring to live with their families, with their friends, with whatever they choose to pursue afterward. They do not need to ruin their personal health or and their future because of it, because they shorted us a few fights. I never begrudge any fighter for saying, I've reached the limits of what I'm willing to do to damage my health for sporting achievement or your entertainment out there, fans. So good for you. Hopefully, it is a long, happy life and you've minimized any damage to your eyesight by making this very smart decision.
Indeed, there's only a certain window of years for a fighter, right? And when your sight could be uh, potentially compromised, Taylor, he did the right thing. I salute him and applaud him for what he did in his career. Um, One of the few fighters to become undisputed um, in a division, and particularly at 140 pounds, particularly when it comes to European, British fighters. So he's well accomplished. He has nothing to be ashamed of. Best to him and his family post career. Let's move on to preview some fights here. And where do I want to go? Let's go with New York on ESPN and what is supposed to be the final ESPN top ranked card. Daniel, and let's start a fight on the undercard. Bruce Shushu Carriengton. Um, I believe he's on the verge of a world title shot. He's ready for a world title fight. Fighting Mateus, Heita, uh, vacant interim WBC belt at 126 pounds. I favor Shushu Carriengton in this. Um, I hope following this fight, there is a legit world title shot afterwards because my fear is he's having some difficulty making weight. But if the if the effort to get down to 126 doesn't really compromise him in this upcoming match, I pick him to win.
Yeah, this is going to be the fight week that I'm going to really look at when it comes to Shushu, because it's been like only for the last one or two fights, it's been that struggle to kind of make 126, and he's so close. He's so close to getting that shot that I don't want him to lose it just based upon the fact that he can't make it on scale. And this is not a decent. This is not an easy fight either. It's going to be a very crafty opponent that he's going to be able to face, but he should be able to get things done, barring any issues on the scale. But this will probably be the week where then his team will have to make the judgment that if he can comfortably still make the weight, or if there's only a mild discomfort, that's fine. If not, I would say his team should do what Robert Garcia did actually last weekend. Robert Garcia, as a trainer, rather than have his fighter try to drain himself on the scale and maybe even embarrassing, took his fighter out, took his fighter out of the fight and cited the health. So hopefully he doesn't reach to that scale, but this should be a decent fight for sure.
The main event of this card, Gail, is a fighter who we've talked about multiple times on this podcast. I had the pleasure of interviewing this fighter, Xander Zayas, getting his first world title fight. Gail fighting Jorge Garcia for the vacant WBO belt. Now, a lot of people say that he was kind of put in this perfect position to fight for a world title fight, but he has it. The opportunity is his to win a world title. Zayas believes he's the goods. He gets his opportunity against Garcia.
Hey, it is not Xander Zayas' fault that his minders at Top Rank have maneuvered him into this position, and that's why Top Rank is so good at what it does, building talent like this. And it's rare that they sign a fighter as early in their development as they did Zayas. They signed him at age 16, long before he was eligible to fight professionally in the United States. They didn't care. They wanted to get their hands on him early. They've brought him along in exactly the right way, and now they've maneuvered him into this opportunity. And I think it's a fair discussion to talk about how he got there and whether he's truly worthy of it yet in his career. Yes, he's been a professional for 7 years, but he started so young, and that's hard to bear in mind sometimes. But again, it's not his fault. He feels ready at the level that this fight's being held. He is not fighting current champion. It's a vacant belt. Hey, a lot of other fighters have earned a belt that way. And it sure as hell beats winning an interim title and then being elevated, a so-called email champion. And no fighter turns that down, but they always get a ton of heat for it. Look at Devin Haney, how much heat he took over being an email champion. No one wants to win a belt that way. It's much better to go take an or a vacant title like this one. And best of luck to him. He's very at home. He's fought at the theater at Madison Square Garden. Actually, he's fought in the big room as well, I think 4 or 5 times at least. So he'll be on home turf, home fans. All of the factors that can be controlled are certainly tipped in his favor. And again, that's what Top Rank does so well.
Indeed, and those two fights, Carriengton's fight, as well as Xander Zayas and his fight against Garcia, that's going to be on the 26th in New York City. On that same evening in Detroit, the return of Claressa Shields, Daniel, as she defends her undisputed belts at heavyweight against Lani Daniels. Are you there, Daniel?
Yes, you cut off a little bit. I'm sorry. But
okay, I'm sorry. Shields Daniels on the same night in Detroit on the Zone. Your thoughts?
well, Claressa hopefully has her mind on her opponent. In this case, she should.
That part, because you've been doing a lot of traveling and making a lot of appearances and whatnot. You hadn't seen much footage of her in the gym.
Yeah, that's the main thing of it. And that's the type of activity that lets you get caught a lot of times by opponents that you normally wouldn't take seriously. Normally in this type of fight, I would expect Claressa to be able to box well, get a couple knockouts, make it easy. But with the activity that she's been doing, with the appearances that she's been doing, and with the noise that she's been doing, like offering Layla Ali $15 million to come out of retirement to fight her, that is almost a perfect playground to get caught by a surprise opponent. I don't think this should be the case, but unfortunately, it wouldn't surprise me given the way Claressa's been moving. But if she's dead serious about
I think Daniel went out on us. Quick word on this fight, Gail. On paper,
Yeah,
she should have her way, but again, is she fully focused?
let us hope so. And she definitely needs to be fully focused, or this will be one of those banana peel fights on the way to something next. I am not 100% sure whether this is Claressa's final fight with her current promoter, Dimitri Salita, or her next to last fight. But MVP, Most Valuable Promotions, yes, that's the Jake Paul and the Kisa Badarian led promoter who has signed a amazing lineup of the women, the best women's pros in the game. They are very interested in Claressa because they are very interested bringing her over to the stable where they have several women opponents for her, and right at the front of the line and ready to go is Shadeja Green, who looks
That's right.
so good on the Taylor Serrano 3 undercard, um, who won the performance of the night and that $250,000 bonus. And yeah, she would love a crack at Claressa. That's a great fight. You know, probably the best matchup for Claressa, since she fought Chantel Cameron. And oh, by the way, Cameron and Savannah Marshall are both MVP fighters as well. And you know, the women tend to fight each other repeatedly in series of fights at the top level because those are the best matchups, especially in those higher weight divisions. It's, you know, can be really tough to find the right opponents. So, but Claressa and Shadeja Green, oh hell yes, bring that on. But Claressa's got to win this week first.
Absolutely. And yeah, she has to take care of business. But if she does, to your point, Gail,
Well,
uh,
and one
um,
more, which I forgot to mention, which I should have, although she wasn't fighting on the Taylor Serrano 3 card. Franchon Cruz Dezern crashed the party and showed up. And, you know, she would like a rematch with Claressa. They both had their first pro fights against each other, a 4 rounder on the Kovalev Ward 2 undercard.
and
So,
quite the entertaining scrap it
oh,
was. A
yeah.
fight that Shields ended up winning by um, decision. That's the last of the kind of boxing related stuff that we're going to talk about. But I want to make a transition here. Um, this is being recorded on July uh, 21st, right? Um, in the early morning hours, um, found out some sad news, right? If you are if you are young Gen X, if you are a millennial, in particular, you all remember the Cosby Show, right? In the 80s and early 90s. Well, news broke early this morning that um, Malcolm Jamal Warner, who played Theo from the Cosby Show, um, shockingly passed away. He was on vacation with his family, died of an apparent drowning. And because I'm in that younger Gen X millennial era, uh, I was, it rocked me to my boots, right? It was like a punch to the solar plexus. I grew up on the Cosby Show. I grew up um, kind of with Theo Huxtable, right? Whether it was that show, or whether it was later on with Malcolm and Eddie, whether it's him playing in a variety of television shows and um, movies. Um, he was part of our childhood, right? I would be remiss if I were to end the show without talking about, and I'll go to you, Daniel, if you're still around, the sad and tragic passing of Malcolm Jamal Warner. What's the Michael Jackson song? Gone Too Soon. You talk about someone who is gone too soon. That is indeed Malcolm Jamal Warner.
Yes, unfortunately, I was, like I said, elder, hard to say elder millennial at this stage. Didn't catch him a lot in the Cosby Show, but my show with him was always Malcolm and Eddie. He showed in that show that he had the comedic timing, he knew how to play as a foil to Eddie Griffin, and was an overall great talent. And a lot of words coming in for also like the Martin Luther King Institute actually put out a really, really heartfelt tweet. They paying tribute to him because he did a lot for causes throughout his community. And ultimately, it's something sad, really, really sad to see, especially us of this generation, because it's getting pretty close to our ages, especially when it's something, it isn't tragic, like it's like an overdose, it's drowning. It's something that can happen to anybody.
Indeed, not just the acting aspect. If you remember the Poetry Slam, the Neo Soul era, um, his work as in that poetry era, his music group, Miles Long, which he continued to do music and poetry up until the very end. Gail, just a multi talented um, actor, multi talented um, individual. He had a podcast that was running right. Had a current podcast talking a variety of topics. Um, I just can't speak enough as to the sad passing of Malcolm Jamal Warner. Gill.
Yeah, it was really shocking. Not a lot of actors who become as famous as he did, iconic as he did, as he wasn't a child actor, but he was a very, he was a teenage young actor. Very few make a successful transition to acting at that level as an adult. And for those people who may not have caught him as a series regular on the what was an ABC network drama called The Resident, he played a heart surgeon, a very
That's right.
egotistical, full of himself heart surgeon who, when he first appeared on the series, was not very likable. But his story arc was seeing him humbled as a professional and as a human being through the course of the series. It was a phenomenal role for him. And long after they sort of lost a little bit of my enthusiasm for the rest of the show. You know, some of their main characters and plot lines, they kind of run out of ideas. But Malcolm Jamal Warner still made that show worth showing up for. It was
And
such
his role in
a
Suits as well.
yes, that's right. You know, and I was so impressed by that. You know, in a lot of ways, that's the role that I personally remember. Well, most people think of him as Theo Huxtable, and rightfully so. Talk about a breakout role, but I am probably I'm all but sure that it wouldn't be tough to find the resident on, you know, a streaming service of choice. I'm sure ABC's streaming is available. Um, And it's fairly easy to just sort of cherry pick off an episode or two where you see maybe he's referenced in the plot description. Do yourself a favor and go back and watch that. And it is also a reminder that, especially for those of us like me who live in a coastal community where a lot of our activities and a lot of our lives are dominated by the ocean, is that you've got to respect getting out there and tangling with the ocean. It's a very, very powerful thing. And unfortunately, Malcolm Jamal Warner was among a lot of people who just underestimate, getting out there and what they can handle. It's just such a shame.
Again, for those who do not know, or again, earlier this morning, Malcolm Jamal Warner, news broke. It was reported that Malcolm Jamal Warner sadly passed away at the age of 54. Um, I will speak for everyone here, pound for pound, boxing report. Rest in honor, rest in power, rest in heaven. And condolences to his family, um, his friends, and his loved ones. Um, I hate to go around the panel on that sad note, but I just felt that had to be discussed here. I'll go around the panel here. Uh, Begin the show with ladies first, end the show with ladies first. Gail from NY Fights, for those who want to talk all things boxing, let the folks know where they can find you.
Well, y'all know that I'm at nyfights.com for my regular coverage, but let me recommend to you Gail Falkenthal on Boxing is my YouTube channel. And I'm also writing on Substack and putting all my columns there. It is not a paid newsletter. It is nothing you necessarily need to subscribe to at all, but you're welcome to follow me there on Substack under Gail Falkenthal on Boxing.
Indeed, indeed. I'll go to you, Daniel, from Four Boxing News and the Inscriber. For those who want to talk boxing, for those who want to talk pro wrestling, for those who want to talk the NBA, especially when it comes to the Miami Heat, let the folks know where they can find you.
I guess you can catch me all handles on Twitter, Blue Sky, Threads, Discord, maybe. Like I said, Rockers 99 or AWKUZ99 definitely the catch me on there. And a Substack is actually going to be a good avenue to go to. It's something that a lot of journalists, independent and big time, have invested as of late. And hopefully, like I said, with Gail now jumping in, we get more female boxing voices on there.
Indeed, indeed. For those who want to talk boxing, music, fitness, and occasional smell good, you can check me out on Twitter, because I refuse to call it X Brother JR. At Brother JR76. You can check me out on IG, Brother JRSC. You can also check me out on Blue Sky, Brother JR76. On the next episode of Pound for Pound Boxing Report, we will have a recap of Claressa Shields and her fight against Lani Daniels. Also, a recap of Xander Zayas and his fight against Jorge Garcia for the vacant WBO belt at 154. Tszyu Carriengton and his fight against his Heita for vacant interim, vacant interim WBC belt at 146. And we will have a preview of Kenshiro Teraji, who we talked about briefly in our discussion about Bam Rodriguez. He returns to the ring in Japan, home country of Japan, on July 30th, fighting Richard Sandoval on the undercard. A couple world title fights on the undercard featuring Antonio Vargas. Speaking of fighters who were kind of email champions, if you will, that was Antonio Vargas, as he was named WBA bantamweight belt holder. He makes his first defense against Diego Higa. Erick Rosa, also named WBA champion at 108, defending that title against a local Japanese fighter by the name of Takami. I want to thank everybody who joined us on this particular episode. Beagle, Compliant Restoration and Roofing. Thank you for your comments throughout. If you're checking us out on YouTube or either now or at a later time, please make sure you hit that like and subscribe button. To do so, you'll get notifications of all future episodes of the Pound for Pound Boxing Report. For Gail from nyfights.com. And what was the YouTube show again, Gail?
Gail Falkenthal on boxing.
Indeed. And for Daniel for Boxing News and the Inscriber, I am your host, Michael. This has been episode 471 of the Pound for Pound Boxing Report. We will see you next time. Everyone have a good evening. Good night.